A reading from John 15. Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. God's love was revealed among us in this way. God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. The challenge presented by today's reading from the epistle of 1 John is the perplexing problem of commenting on the nature of God's love, without the commentary becoming completely airy-fairy and without substance, yet at the same time conveying the mystical quality that is inherent in any discussion of divine love. I think, however, that in my struggle, I'm in good company. The writer of 1 John seems to also struggle to describe divine love, moving back and forth between the mystical and the grounded, trying to express an idea that is ultimately inexpressible. Conveying the challenge of understanding godly love, John's writer says, "No one has ever seen God. How can we love what we haven't seen?" He flips back and forth between an assurance of God's abiding presence and the evidence of that presence in concrete expressions of love for our brothers and sisters. He writes that if we don't know love, we don't know God, because God is love. Loving God is such a high-flying notion that I have trouble getting my mind about what that could even mean. I know what it means to love you. You guys are easy to love. Well, at least most of you are easy to love, most of the time. But loving some ethereal, non-personified notion of God presents more of a challenge, and that is the first commandment. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. Worship is an effort to realize the love of God. We sing praises, we say prayers, we celebrate the Eucharist. These are attempts to express our love for the divine. But we all fall short. In our feeble endeavor to express the love for God, we join with the trembling chorus of humanity since creation, striving to get across an idea we can't quite grasp. It's the mystical side of why we show up here. I know that for me, and for many of you, coming to church on Sunday morning feeds the soul, offers sustenance to sustain us throughout the week. This opportunity to communicate our love of God gives us something we need, but we aren't fed like a hungry man, home from a hard day's work, who sits down to a hearty meal of roast beef and mashed potatoes and is satisfied. No, even when worship succeeds, our best attempts to express our love for God leave us still hungry. Because, you see, love of God is in the longing. Our desire for God always remains unfulfilled. At its best, worship leaves us wanting more. We find God in our desire to love God, to love what is essentially unknowable, to reach out to that which is invisible, to comprehend that which is mysterious. Our best writers know that this is true of love between humans. Oscar Wilde said, "The only thing worse than unrequited love is requited love." Peanuts, Charlie Brown, disagreed, cryptically observing that nothing spoils the taste of peanut butter like unrequited love. It is, I think, that unquenchable love, that God-shaped hole that exists within each of us, that leads us to love others. Love for God and love for our neighbor, they're two sides of the same coin. After noting that the first commandment was to love God, Jesus said, "The second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." We love because God first loved us. Love is from God. If we love one another, God lives in us and his love is perfected in us. In our culture, where we typically seek to satisfy our desires, it's counterintuitive for us to think that the longing itself can be redemptive. That is, it is the longing that is the goal, not the satisfaction of the longing. But if we stay hungry for God, we're likely to fall in love with our brothers and sisters. We live in a world of administered desire, commercial world where our desires are created by the likes of Amazon, Facebook, and TikTok. Our desires are manipulated so that we are compelled to try to purchase satisfaction. Christian love, in contrast, is a love born of desire, of want, of emptiness, of longing to experience oneness with God. But though this love was conceived in want and in desire, this same love finds its truest expression in an outpouring of unselfishness. We don't satisfy the longing that is inherent in the human condition by accumulation, by getting more people to love us, by collecting friends on Facebook, or by filling the void with stuff or novel experiences. The emptiness inside is calling us to empty ourselves more, to give of what we have and of what we are. Our hunger is for God's love, and God tells us that God's love will live in us, be perfected in us as we learn to love one another. Dostoevsky had his character, Ivan Karamazov, to say, Christ's love for human beings was an impossible miracle on earth. But he was God, and we are no gods. The idea of loving one's neighbor is possible only as an abstraction. It may be conceivable to love one's fellow man at a distance, but it's almost never possible to love him at close quarters. I don't share Karamazov's cynicism, partly because I'm not cynical by nature, but mostly because I've seen that despite the difficulty of following the second great commandment, it is possible to love at close quarters. Loving our neighbor is a challenge, but such is the challenge of the call to follow Christ, to love as God loved us. It would almost be impossible on our own, but as followers of Christ, we are thankfully not on our own. As noted in the gospel reading today, just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself, unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. There's one more passage from the epistle that I can't avoid bringing to your attention. There's no fear in love. The perfect love casts out fear, for fear has to do with punishment. And whoever fears has not reached perfection in love. Every one of you here knows that our attempts to love are filled with fear. Our fear is that we will love and the love we offer will not be returned. It is, in fact, our fear that our love will not be reciprocated, remain unrequited, that prevents us from loving, from offering love in the first place. I'm not sure that Jesus had the church in mind when he told the parable of the vine and the vine grower. But I wouldn't be the first to notice that there are parallels between the vine and the church. In fact, the image of the vine, with its twisting and growing branches, feels a lot like the Church of the Redeemer, and the Church of the Holy Trinity. As our community grows, our lives become increasingly intertwined. Our pains and joys cross and touch each other, and opportunities to exhibit grace, practice forgiveness, and to demonstrate love become more frequent. As the vines spread and we grow in the faith, our roots dig deeper, searching for meaning and for sustenance. And we all bring to this vineyard a dung heap of lost love and broken dreams. But that is the stuff that brings substance and fertility to the soil on which this church is planted. Manure makes for very fertile ground, and it is from that richly manured soil that new life emerges. New, green, vibrant branches will form, and old branches, old tired ways of being will fall away. And we as a people, sharing the love of God, will learn to love one another. Amen.